This is draft season. Hello, everybody. I am John Schmeelk. As always, we're joined by Tony Pauline from Sportskeeda. Draft season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risks into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at moodys.com. Tony, we recorded this last week. People are seeing this. It's airing on the Monday of the week the combine begins. We're both probably right now on a plane to Indianapolis, or at least or I'm not sure when you're getting there. I'm getting there Monday afternoon. So I'm probably en route. You're probably packing your bags to leave for Indy. And then the fun all begins. You'll have coaches and general managers talking Tuesday and Wednesday. Then the players start cooking on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they work out over the weekend. Combine's always a lot of fun, Tony. Can't wait to see you out there.
I'll be there Tuesday evening. It's fun. It's a lot different than when I first went in 2001. Believe me, it's a media and fan circus where when I started going, 25 years ago, it was like a KGB event, the way it was locked down. And it's definitely different. It's definitely a change, especially with the fans in there and they're screaming and yelling for the Colt fans in there when they're screaming and yelling because they want a quarterback or they want a specific quarterback. And Xavier Worthy last year runs the 4.19 and the place erupts like he scored a game-winning touchdown. So it's fun. It's completely different from what I've been used to in the past.
Well, luckily, Tony had used his CIA skills to weasel his way in there 25 years ago to kind of get this whole thing started for him. And look, it's even different than I was there. I started, I think 2011, 2012 was my first combine. And that's when they had Radio Row literally in the atrium where you walked into the stadium and there were maybe 10 or 12 tables there. We were the only NFL team that was there for a few years. And now it's a literally entire room of the convention center where you probably have 50 Radio Row tables in that room. You have all 32 teams, then probably another 20 to 25 radio stations and TV stations and podcasts and everything else. So it's big now, man. And look, it's kind of like an NFL convention. Everyone in the NFL is there. Not all the coaches, but most of the coaches, all the general manager, all of the scouts. And this is a time of year, Tony, not only when people examine these draft picks and talk to them and, watch them perform on the field and they talk at the podium. This is also a lot of business is done behind the scenes by these NFL teams with free agency only a couple weeks away.
I mean, the Senior Bowl is where talks of free agency begin, just tepid talks. But the Combine has always been the unofficial start of free agency because they'll never say this publicly, but they talk money, they talk terms, they talk what you want, what we're willing to give. So, and also, like I said last week when we did the mock draft, we'll get a clearer picture on what Tennessee wants to do and if there are any takers for that top spot. So you get a lot of news like that. It's kind of funny you talk about Radio Row because the first combine I went to in 2001, there was no media center. I mean, I walked out of the workouts very gingerly for some obvious reasons. And you would have the John Claytons, the Chris Mortensons of the world who were standing outside the workouts with their notepads and their battery-operated recording devices. I mean, regular batteries because you couldn't charge them up on a UBS device. And wow, how that has changed.
Absolutely. All right, Tony, give me the we're going to go position by position here. But before we do, Tony, give me your top 3 to 5 things you're looking forward to seeing at the Combine this year.
Obviously, I want to see Shedeur Sanders if he throws the ball because, like John said, we're doing this a week and a half, more than a week and a half before the players actually take to the field. So we don't know if these guys are going to work out. Want to watch Shedeur Sanders. Want to see how his throwing technique, because that's something we'll talk about. His throwing techniques, his throwing fundamentals are just not good on film. Let me just pull my list up here real quick. Does Travis Hunter, does he run? How fast does he run? Everyone's talking about Travis Hunter as this generational talent. He doesn't look like a 4.3 guy. And, you would expect somebody that's going to go that early in a draft, play the receiver and the cornerback position, to run super fast. The other thing about Travis Hunter is he's already been announced that he's going to work out with the cornerbacks. What receiver drills do they have him do? Because at the Combine, there's always things called alternate position drills. And anybody watching this show watches the combine knows that they'll have the defensive line workout and the defensive linemen go through that workout, and then they'll have the defensive linemen go through coverage drills, basically drop off the line of scrimmage and try and catch the ball as though they were simulating a zone blitz. What are they going to do with Travis Hunter if he works out about getting him receiver work, during the cornerback drills? Is he going to stay on the field? Is he going to be asked to run routes? Mike Sanistril did that last year, not the cornerback position, but at his pro day workout, and was phenomenal. What are the arm length of Kelvin Banks? We talk about Kelvin Banks. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? Kelvin Banks wasn't at the Senior Bowl. Say where Josh Connolly was. Say the way Membo of Missouri was. So we don't know what Kelvin Banks' arm length is.
Same
which
with
is
Will
going to
Campbell, right?
Well, there you go. You beat me too. Same thing with Will Campbell. I mean, people are talking about Will Campbell having these short arms. I've not heard that. And again, let's go back a couple of years ago when we were doing the show. I was constantly, talking about Peter Skronsky of Northwestern having short arms, which was going to push him from tackle to guard. I've heard it on the outside, but no one on the inside has talked about Will Campbell's short arms. You're going to want to see Campbell have arms. I would prefer 35 and a half inches. Some people are okay with a tackle having arms that are 33 inches. If they're under 33 inches, if they're 32 and a half or something like that, it's going to be a big red flag for him being a tackle on Sunday.
Yeah, if he can get to 34, he'll be fine. That to me is kind of
34 is absolutely fine. There's no doubt about it. But there are some teams that will be okay because of his length with the 33 and a half.
That'll be interesting to see. I remember, for Giant fans that are watching this, we remember the old Justin Pugh debates from, more than 10 years ago now, where I think he was like 33 and an eighth, and it was like, he's too short to play tackle. He has to play guard. So this is a debate that rages on forever. All right. Let's go position by position here, Tony. You kind of mentioned already with the quarterbacks. Cam Ward spoke at some type of award thing that he accepted the other day last week. And he said he doesn't know if he's throwing yet. You mentioned Shedeur Sanders. I'm assuming everyone else is probably going to throw. That's healthy because, they're trying to move up, get into that first round with this quarterback. But it's always fun, to see how the ball comes out of these guys' hands back to back next to each other in their group,
Yeah, and you want to see a guy like Jalen Milroe. What is his accuracy like downfield? Because Jalen Milroe, the passes on film were all over the place. And as you mentioned in our Senior Bowl review, he didn't even throw the ball downfield in Mobile. It looked like he was a little bit timid. And really, Jalen Milroe has seemed to lose a lot of confidence in his passing. So, you want to watch that. Same thing with Riley Leonard. I mean, Notre Dame. How accurate is he down the field? You look at Jackson Dart and Dylan Gabriel. What are their deep passes like? Can they get the deep pass downfield with speed? I think when you look at Quinn Ewers, I think when you look at Kyle McCord, even when you look at Syracuse, Will Howard of Ohio State, they've got big arms. They can get the ball downfield. They're relatively accurate. Their issue is they're slow moving their heads from the primary target sometimes. Quinn Ewers is a bit late pulling the trigger at times. There's no way to calculate that or basically to give a grade on that during combine workouts where they're throwing in a designed route to a specific receiver with no defender there.
And also a receiver they've never thrown to before either. So there are a lot of things to take into consideration when you're figuring out the accuracy.
And that's how that's where usually the best, I don't want to say the winner, but the best quarterback workouts from the combine come. It's the guys that show the timing, the guys that show the accuracy on a field that they've never played on before, most of them anyway, throwing to receivers that they met maybe 24 hours ago. So there have been some workouts like that where a guy just blows it away because he's so accurate, the timing is on, the deep outs, which is probably the most important pass during combine workout. He drops it in the bucket in the receiver's hands. Those are the things to look for.
All right, let's go to the pass catchers, Tony. And look, I have not, unless it's something else on the quarterbacks you want to hit, I have not heard anything. I don't know anything. But my guess is going to be that Shedeur and Travis Hunter are going to want to do pro day only, and that's what they're going to do. It just seems like something, you want to, Colorado, Dion gets a lot of people to come to Colorado, right, to go to the pro day. He gets to advertise the program and things like that. That's just a gut feeling that I have. We'll see. But I think what Travis Hunter runs is important, right? And I think what he weighs in at, is he 5'11", 180 pounds? Is he 5'10", 180 pounds? What is he going to measure? I think that's going to be important. And to your point that you made earlier, I thought it was a good one. You know, 5'11", 185-pound wide receivers that run 4.48s are generally not top five picks, nor cornerbacks at that size and speed are top five picks. So, on tape, you do see him turn the jets on sometimes. When I was watching him, he's one of the guys I watched last week on my week off. And some of the times I'm like, is he really running full speed? Watching him on tape. But then I'm like, wait a second, he's also playing like 160 plays a game. So,
Right.
like, can you expect him to run full speed all the time? So I'm with you. I'm very curious to see how fast Hunter is when he does eventually run his 40.
And again, that's why, in my opinion, he's not a generational type talent. I would argue that Ted McMillan is the best receiver in this draft, but maybe Travis Hunter is the better athlete. I mean, Ted McMillan, is he going to run? Because is he going to do any testing at all? He'll probably do the vertical jump because he looks like a guy that can jump through the roof.
Oh, Hunter, oh
But
my
he
gosh. Yeah, that guy can jump. Oh my goodness. The way he goes up to gets the ball, he's unbelievable.
ditto for McMillan as well.
Yep.
And I mean, but McMillan, what type of testing is he going to do? Is he going to do any type of testing? Because we've seen in recent years where a lot of these guys just won't do any testing. If he's getting good information, Ted McMillan, that he's going to be a top 8 pick, he may just say, you know what, the hell with it. I'm not going to run the 40 between
Do you
now
do you
and
think he's a sub 4.5 guy, Tony?
on film, no. On film, he looks like a 4.55, 4.52 guy. But he makes up for it by the fact that he's just a dominant receiver. You know what? He may not be sub 4.5 foot speed, but he's like a 4.2 in his head because he knows what's going on in the field. He's clairvoyant, and he's on the same page as his quarterback, even though his quarterback wasn't that well. He knows how to come back. Seems to know how to read the defenses, find the soft spot in the defense. So I think with him it's just incredible natural pass catching skills, and he's got it going on between the ears.
And I think his wingspan and arm length and standing reach and all that sort of stuff will be important too, right? Because he's got such a big frame. You think of
Right.
T. Higgins, and when I watch him, I think of like really good T. Higgins type of receiver. So I think that'll be interesting to see too. I also think for a guy like Luther Burden, Tony, for a guy that is not polished as a wide receiver in terms of being a route runner, he better test really well. Because if he's going to be relied upon as a run after catch yak guy, you have to be a really good athlete in order to be that type of player. Unless you're a 230-pound wide receiver like Deebo Samuel is, and that's not what Luther Burden is. He's not 230 pounds. So I think how he tests is going to be important for his draft stock too.
And we may not find it until we come out with the master rule. But what Burden is, it's also that 10-yard split, not just the
Yep.
40 time. It's the 10-yard split because the 10-yard split is that initial quickness, which is not just important getting off the line of scrimmage, but it's super important, transitioning from catching the ball to running after the catch. You're going to help me with this name here. The kid that the receiver the Giants drafted from Kentucky a couple of years ago. Is there number
Wandale
2?
Robinson.
He's super quick when the ball's in his hands. That's what you got to see from Bird.
No, I'm with you 100%. And then, Tony, you have the battle for who the next wide receiver is, right? Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, I think, is going to run really fast. He might be the fastest wide receiver there. The big Stanford kid, Iomanner, we'll see how he runs. If he could put a good time together, that'll help his stock a lot. So I think then there's a fierce competition for who that next receiver off the board is going to be.
Yeah, and I don't see, obviously, the talk is going to be, are any of these guys going to beat Xavier Worthy? And they're not.
No.
And the next question is, how many of these guys can broach the low 4.3s, possibly get on a 4.3? And I don't really see, Tez Johnson, maybe, of Oregon. But you're right. I mean, when you look at the guys, Ibuka, I think, is maybe a mid 4.4 guy. Iomanner, I mean, he's not as slow as McMillan, but he's not a burner. I mean, Jalen Noel, the kid from Iowa State, I would expect him to lay down a pretty fast time.
I think he was a shot at a high 4.3s, like a 4.38, 4.39. I think Noel, based on what I saw at Senior Bowl, I think Noel is a shot.
And I agree with you. Bond's going to be pretty quick, but the question with Bond is, how does he catch the ball? Because when I did my film work, which I just finished on the SEC, Bond as a receiver needs a lot of work on his game.
All right, and then one other guy I want to bring up to you because I know he's a really good player. He's a really good wide receiver. But what is Xavier Restrepo going to run, Tony? Can he hit 4.52, or is he going to be like a 4.58, 4.59 guy? I think there are levels to this where how fast or slow is he going to run?
Yeah, I think he's going to be more in the mid 4.5s. But again, with Spestro, you want to look at the three cone and you want to look at the short shuttle
Yep.
because his mo, his strength is not straight line speed. It's the ability to move laterally with quickness and separate from the defenders. And a lot of that lateral quickness will be told through the three cone and through the short shuttle.
Yeah, Tony, I'm with you. All right, let's go to tight end, unless there's another wide receiver you want to bring up there.
Nope.
All right, tight end. Here we
go.
Well,
yeah, one other guy, Corey Brooks of Louisville, who I like a lot. He has a lot riding on the line with his 40 time because scouts say in the mid 4.4s. I'm told it's the mid 4.5s. If he runs in the mid 4.5s, he's going to drop.
He was good at the Shrine Bowl. He was one of the better wide receivers down there. So someone to make note of. All right, tight end position, Tony. And look, this is such a strong class here that I think testing is going to be really important because the tight end has become a testing position, right? Teams like to draft really big, strong, fast athletes, explosive athletes, and then trade them to play tight end. That's kind of where a lot of guys have had success. And there are a lot of talented guys here. And I think they're kind of bunched together a lot, to be honest with you, too. So how players test could really, I think, impact where they get picked in this draft.
Well, I think you got kind of two groups in the sense that you got Loveland and Warren, who are not going to be as fast as Arroyo or Gadsden. I would expect Arroyo and Gadsden to put down some pretty fast times.
You think they'll be that much faster than Loveland, huh?
Yeah, I think they're going to be mid to low 4.5s. I mean, you see it on foul. Loveland's fast, but I think the other guys are really fast for the tight end position. The thing about Warren is I'm told that Warren is going to test really well in everything other than the 40. And what's going to happen is Warren will probably run in the mid 4.7s in the 40, maybe in the low 4.7s. But he's going to jump. He's going to vertical jump really well, and he's going to broad really well. And you can read into that any way you want. But I think the narrative will be, well, all these other guys ran much faster than Tyler Warren, but Warren did have some other good testing numbers, or was supposed to have some other good testing numbers.
Yeah. How do you think Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green's going to test?
I mean, what was he, 240 pounds at the Senior Bowl, maybe a hair or two. I mean, to me on film, he looks like a low 4.6 guy. He doesn't look like he's going to be super fast.
Curious to see how Terrence Ferguson tests and Gunnar Helm. Yep. Those are two guys that I think showed to be good wide receivers. I don't know, if they're going to break 4.7, those guys. Something to keep an eye on. Those are the guys that kind of interest me there. Anyone else at tight end, Tony?
Tight end, no. I mean Thomas Fidoni of Nebraska, who we saw at the Senior Bowl. Very interesting prospect. You mentioned Gunnar Helm. I'm looking for the kid from the Simon kid from South Carolina, who looks like he's a real good athlete. Just not a really big guy. We saw him at the Senior Bowl as well.
All right, Tony, let's go to offensive tackle or offensive line. And, you kind of mentioned this in my first question to you. Arm length. What guys can stick at tackle, what guys have to move into guard. The good news is that we've got measurements on most of these guys from the Senior Bowl, right? There's only, I think, 2 guys at the top of the class 3 that we don't really have good measurements on, and that's Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, Will Campbell out of LSU, and then we talk about Kelvin Banks out of Texas. Right.
Happen to be your top 3 guys. So, depending on your board, probably your top three offensive linemen, right?
Correct. So while we have measurements for like everybody else in like the first 3 rounds, those are the 3 guys that like we're anxiously waiting to see. Can they get to 33.5 inches? Can they get to 34-inch arms when they get measured?
Well, let me just pull up. I got a little chart here, and I will look it up as we are. But I believe Simon was measured in the preseason where Campbell and Banks were. And when I say measured, and here we go. If you just want to bear with me for a second.
Yep. Simmons got measured preseason by Ohio State.
Simmons. No, I am incorrect about that. I thought he was, but I'm looking at my list now. So no, the 3 of them, none of them were measured preseason. So you're right to go with your initial thought. None of these 3 guys, we don't have arm measurements on them. We don't have length, which is also going to be important for Kelvin Banks. Is he 6'4"? A lot of people don't think he's going to even be 6'4". and that will be a determining factor, especially with Will Campbell. I mean, because everyone expects Will Campbell to be the first offensive lineman off the board. People have been projecting him as a guard throughout most of the season. I disagree with that, but it is vitally important.
And then a couple guards, Tony, that they were not at the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, so we did not get measurements on them. Is Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama, could be the first straight up guard taken in this draft, if not a guy that moves from tackle to guard. And then Donovan Jackson of Ohio State, another guy that we don't have measurements on in terms of arm length. So those are two guys I'm curious to see when they get on the scales and they put the tape measure on those two guys, what they end up being.
Well, I think the thing with Booker, the scale, that's important for Booker as it's going to be for the tackle from Texas, Cameron Williams. But that is going to be the big issue with Booker. How much does he weigh? If he tests, what are his testing numbers like at that weight? Because as we've seen, sometimes guys can be a little bit too big. Now, if you want to hear, Donovan Jackson coming into the season was measured at just under 34.5-inch arms and hands that were over 10 inches. So wow. The arm length is going to be a problem. Probably one of the reasons why he did such a good job when they kicked him out to left tackle, because he's got longer arms.
Yeah, and if he tests well enough, that team might say, heck, we're going to try him at tackle. And if he moves well enough, they think he's got the feet for it. Something to keep an eye on, certainly. Any other offensive lineman that you kind of have circled that we did not get measurements at, or you don't have measurements for, from Shriner Senior or your sources that you think this could be very important for?
Well, it's not just measurements. Gray Zabel, the kid from North Dakota State, how does he test? I mean, he's got a lot of momentum going in his way, for himself. How is he going to do? Drew Kendall out of Boston College, really not a lot of information on him. Drew Kendall, the center who was initially entered the transfer portal, then decided to enter the draft. I think what's also going to be interesting, although it's not as prominent as it was at the Shriner Senior Bowl, is when they do drills, how many of these guys do they ask to snap the ball? Because there's really not a lot of talent at the center position. Some of your better centers are going to be guards, even tackles who are kicked into the center position. So when they're doing drills, watch for some of those college guards, maybe even tackles, that all of a sudden are standing over the ball, snapping the ball, and simulating playing center, because that's going to mean that teams believe these guys have center potential at the next level.
Drew Kendall, son of Pete Kendall, former NFL offensive lineman. Yeah, those are most of the names for me. A couple small school guys. We got to see how that, we're not at Senior and Shrine, how they measure. Your guy Charles Grant is one of them, right, from William and Mary. So those couple of small school guys, too, we'll keep an eye on there. All right, let's go to running back, Tony. And this is more of a basic question for running back. Is 40 times still a big deal for these scouts and evaluators at the running back position? I've seen so many running backs that don't necessarily test well in the 40. They end up being great backs. How essential is that these days for running backs to have good 40 times?
More important is, do they meet or exceed expectations? Okay, so Ashton Jeanty, if scouts expect him to run a 4.48 and he runs a 4.62, that's a problem. I mean, Ashton Jeanty's a great running back. He was outstanding in the Mountain West Conference. It's not super important, but you want to meet expectations, if not exceed them. We have Bruce Feldman on the first show every year, right? And I always ask Bruce Feldman, does his article on his top 100 freaks, does he think it impacts a player's decision to work out before the draft? Because if he's like Bruce, if he's one of Bruce's top 10 athletic freaks, and he's got all these expectations that he's going to do all these outstanding, he's going to run like the wind, and he's going to run a great 3-cone, and, he's going to jump through the roof. And that's what the expectations are. Players sometimes will pull back. It's not super important, but it is important that you meet the expectations, if not exceed them, that scouts have of you.
I'm with you. What running backs do you think are going to maybe exceed expectations and put up really good 40 times from some of the top guys in this group?
I think Omarion Hampton, you want to see what he weighs. He's expected to be about 215 pounds. How fast does he run? Because he looks like a pretty fast guy on film. So if he's 215 pounds and he can run in the mid 4.4s, which is expected, I mean, that is That's going to be important for him. Kyle Manegi out of Rutgers, a real good back, but he's only 205 pounds. He doesn't look super fast. I mean, him not running a decent time being in the low 4.5s, high 4.8s, high 4.4s, like 4.48, that could negatively impact his draft stock. You know, one of your favorite guys, DJ Harvey, how fast is he? Because he's not the biggest running back in the world. He's super quick. I mean, he beats you with quickness. He beats you with great footwork. He sets up defenders. And he makes them miss. He shows the ability on film to run to daylight. Is he fast enough, or does he time well enough, at least, to run to daylight? Raheem Sanders, he's not a fast guy on film. He had a real good season, moved up draft boards, but you want to see, you want to see what his 40 time is. You want to see what his 10 split is. And a guy like Sanders, you want to see what his 3-cone is as well, especially those bigger backs who sometimes have difficulty changing direction, cutting back against the grain.
I want to see what Devin Neal runs, Tony. He's super productive. I want to see how fast he is. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, another guy. Yep. How fast is he? And then a guy that if he runs well, and I don't think expectations for Cam Skattebo are very high. I think people are thinking, low 4.5s, rather high 4.5s, low 4.6s type of area. But if he could put a good time together with his physicality, pass catching, ability to break tackles, he could move up into the second round or, late first round to me if he puts a really good 40 time on the board.
Yeah, and I think with Skattebo, you got to look more towards the 3-cone and you got to look more towards the shuttle. He is what he is, running straight ahead. I mean, he is a guy who seems to invite contact. Yep. He seems to be a guy who really enjoys doling out the punishment. But when you watch him on film, he loses a lot of momentum trying to cut back. He has to gather himself. Oftentimes he's off balance. So I think for Skattebo, you hit it right on the hammer. He's a low 4.6 guy. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to beat defenders into daylight with foot speed or beat them into the open field with foot speed or run to daylight. I think for him, the big thing is, how does he do in those agility tests? Because, cutting back against the grain, changing the angle of his runs seems to be a problem for him on film.
How's your guy Jordan James going to run, Tony? He's one of your favorites. How do you think he's going to do?
Very explosive. I'd be surprised if he's slower than a 4.51, 4.52. But he's just a guy who is super explosive on film.
All right. Anyone else on offense that you want to touch on, Tony, before we jump over to the defensive side of the ball?
Trevor Etienne. I mean, of Georgia, who's entered the draft off a somewhat disappointing season, but you watch the film, he looks fast. He's got the burst. Maybe he's not a low 4.4 guy, but that 10 split should be very, very explosive. And again, the agilities, the 3-cone, the short shuttle, you would expect good times. Trevor Etienne needs good times because that's his game. His game is cutting back against the grain. His game is altering angles of runs multiple times during a single carry.
Draft season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at moodys.com. All right, let's go to defense, Tony. Let's go to the defensive line. You could take it. Do you want to go defensive end first, defensive tackle? What do you want to do?
Let's combine them.
All right, talk to me. Who are you keeping an eye on here?
Well, Mikael Williams, he's a speed rusher. He's going to have to test very well. He's not the biggest guy in the world. Kenneth Grant, I'm excited to see. I mean, he looks very athletic on film. Did the numbers match the athleticism on film? And, a big defensive tackle, as we've seen, you want to get close to that 5.00, 5-second flat number, if not quicker than that. You want to see, what does Kenneth Grant weigh in at? How fast is he? How athletic is he? And again, with these guys, it's more, the 10 split with the big guys than it is the 40 time. But the 40 time is a measure of athleticism. Tyleik Williams, I mean, is he 320 pounds? Is he higher, more than 320 pounds? How is he testing? He was expected to be about 320, 322 pounds in the offseason. A guy who's going to get under 5'2", which is an outstanding number. Landon Jackson, I mean, again, 270, almost 280 pounds. How fast, how athletic is he? You look at Derek Harmon. What is he going to weigh in at? Because he was not at the Senior Bowl. Nick Scourton, who we spoke about during our mock first-round draft show. What does he weigh in at versus what he's testing? And, of course, Michael Green as well.
Yeah, look, I want to see how well Michael Williams tests, Tony,
Yeah.
because I got to be honest
Yep.
with you, when I watch him on tape, I don't see like a super explosive, twitchy guy. I want to see how he moves and tests. That to me is important. And you're talking about guys that I think are trying to prove something and improve their stock from doubts. I think two guys that are undersized defensive tackles, Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss and TJ Sanders out of South Carolina,
Yeah.
they're both 280 something pound defensive tackles. If you're going to be a 280 something pound defensive tackle, you better look really athletic. You better move. Those guys better test really well, or I think the red flag about their size will go up the flagpole just a
Yeah.
little bit more.
And Sanders on film looks athletic. I mean,
He
Sanders
does.
is a guy who on film he will chase the action downfield and catch plays. I agree with you. I mean, you see Walter Nolan showing the ability to get out in space, move out laterally, and pursue the action. Deion Walker. I mean, we saw him at the Senior Bowl. I thought it was a complete dud. I thought he was really overweight and out of shape. Does he test at the combine? And how does he test at the combine? Ashton Gillette of Louisville is going to be an interesting guy to watch. Not expected to run all that fast, low 4.8s, high 4.7s. He's 275 pounds. And if he doesn't test well, but you watch the film where he's just an explosive defensive lineman, where is he going to go and what position is he going to play? Is he a defensive end? Is he a three technique tackle? So I think Gelati, I keep saying Gillette, Ashton Gillette is going to be an interesting guy to watch as far as his testing is concerned.
Yeah, and that might determine where they want to play him too, right? Is he an end? Is he a tackle? Like where do you put him on that defensive front? I'm with you. I think Deion Walker and how he moves and tests, how in shape does he look? To be quite frankly, when they do the measuring and all that sort of stuff, I think that's going to be a big deal. Yeah, I'm with you. Look, it's a good group, and this is kind of where guys can try to separate themselves. No one's taking any more snaps. No one's playing any more games. There's no more All-Star games. So many of these guys are going to be packed in, Tony, from pick like 15 to 50 on the defensive line, 15 to 60, 15 to 70. This is an opportunity for all these guys to try to separate themselves at least a little bit with how they measure and how they test.
Yeah, and again, how are these guys going to test? I mean, Shamar Turner of Texas A&M, I had a story on him. He had a fracture in his shin. He played through it. They put a rod in his shin. That's why he didn't play at the Senior Bowl. Don't know if he's going to be able to work out. And that's a guy that can impact the early portion, if not late first round, at least early part of day two. So it's important to keep an eye on him.
Yeah, and then I think Shamar Turner,
Right.
the other Shamar, like he has to test great because he has literally,
Shamar Stewart, you mean?
yeah, what I say, Turner? Yeah, Shamar
Yeah.
Stewart, very little production.
Yeah.
So, and he looks like an unbelievable athlete on tape at his size. So
Yeah.
he's going to have to test, I think, really well in order for people to be more willing to look past that lack of production. And then Princey Uman Mielen, who I thought was disappointing at the Senior Bowl, can he test really well to kind of boost his stock a little bit up? All right, now
And
let's go to
he just, go back to what I said about expectations. He's a guy that is expected to run in the 4.6s, in the mid 4.6s. That's what they expect him to run. So you got to watch when he tests, if he tests, how fast does he run? Because you mentioned how he was disappointing at the Senior Bowl. I mean, he's a guy that has disappointed a lot throughout his career. He should be much better than he is. He should be much more productive, much more consistent, I think is the best way to put it. And if he goes in and he lays it down at the combine, he's running the mid 4.7s. That's going to hurt him.
Yeah, all right. Let's go to the edge outside linebacker position here, Tony. You have these groups combined. And again, Abdul Carter, I think the expectation is that he's going to test off the charts. We'll
Right.
see if it's Micah Parsons levels off the chart. Jalen Walker, I think another guy that people expect to test extremely well. Same
Yep.
for James Pierce. These are all
Yep.
the smaller 240-ish pound edge players that they're not going to win with size. They're not going to win with power. They're going to have to win with athleticism. So all three of those guys, Tony, and I'll throw Olufemi Oladejo into that mix, though he's 261 pounds. He's bigger. These are guys that are going to have to test really well if they're going to go as high as people think in the draft.
And again, are they 240 or do they come in at 250? And if they come in at 250, how do they test? One thing the combine has changed is they weigh these guys and measure these guys right before they work out. because the
which
old
I
trick
like, by
was,
the way. I think that's the right way to do it. So you
of
can't
course
chug
it
all the
is,
water. That's you have to
right?
do it that way.
And I never understand how you could put on so much water weight. You know, you're gonna drink 5 pounds. Well, I never understood it, but you know that's what they used to do. Is they would pack on the water, they drink it to put on extra weight before weigh-ins, and then the workouts would be 2 days later. So you know, to your point about the top guys, Bill Carter, Jalen Walker, James Pierce, expecting to blow the roof off with their testing, you know, how much do they weigh? Are they the 240, as you just said, or are they a little bit heavier? I think some of the guys that you got to watch for 40 times into testing, Kyle Kennard
Yep.
of South Carolina and Donovan Izurukwa of Boston College. These guys are not great athletes, but they're outstanding football players. And I mean, is Izuka 248 pounds? Is he going to get under that 4.7 time? What is his 10 split? Because again, it's the 10 split. He's not running 40 yards to catch the quarterback. He's running, 5 to 6 yards to get the quarterback. Same thing with Kennard. Kennard is expected to be a guy that's going to run in the 4.8s. Can he beat that? He looks faster than a 4.8 on film.
And that 3-cone drill, too, for Ezeraku, I think another thing that'll be important. I'm with you on that. Anybody else that you think might surprise from this edge class or outside linebacker class, Tony, or you think is very essential for how they might test out?
Let's watch David Walker, Central Arkansas, right? A kid who blew up the Senior Bowl. He's got a funky build. Is he a one-gap defensive end? Is he an outside linebacker? How fast is he? He's got a lot of momentum going in his direction. Tyreen Powell of Rutgers, who's had a lot of injuries, was a favorite of mine, a couple of years ago before the injury set in. He's supposed to be super athletic, 250 pounds, running the 4.6s. I don't know. He's a guy who ruptured his Achilles a year ago and still played the season. We'll see how he does. As far as the rest, Jashin Davis is not there. That is Braden Swinson of LSU, who on film looks like a terrific edge rusher. So with Swinson 6'3.5", 250 pounds. How does he test?
All right, let's jump over to inside linebacker, Tony. A position where you want speed and it's important, but I don't know how important testing is for this spot where it's more about how you see things and how fast you react.
Well, one kind of offsets the other, right? Because you could be a linebacker who tests in the 4.7s, but your brain is going at a 4.2, and It makes up for the lack of speed, as opposed to, you could be a linebacker that runs a 4.4, but your brain's going at a 4.8, and you're always late get to the action. But still, Danny Stutzman, you want to see him test relatively well. You want to see his sideline to sideline movement. Carson Schweisinger, who a lot of people love, think he's one of the better off-ball linebackers. What's his size and what's his speed? How big is he? And how does he move? And again, with the linebackers, you want to see the agility drills. You want to see the 3-cone. You want to see the short shuttle, because linebacker or off the ball linebacker, you're spending often as much time going sideline to sideline as you are going in a straight line, to the action. We didn't mention Jack Sawyer, Barrett Carter, who's kind of had an off season. He's barely 6 foot tall, or is he 6 foot tall? How does he test? Jeffrey Bassa, who I like a lot, undersized guy. Is he a real good athlete? Cody Simon of Ohio State. I mean, kind of forgotten in that Buckeye defense because there's so much star talent around him. Yet he's a guy who is one of those linebackers that his brain is going at a 4.2. How does he test in the 40? I think he'll test relatively well.
All right, let's go to corner, Tony, a position that I would not consider one of the strongest positions in this draft class. So I think this is going to be huge for that spot, right? We talked about maybe some of these positions, the 40 time is not essential. It's not do or die. There is no position where speed is more important than at quarterback and then a cornerback. Pardon me. You got to chase wide receivers around. You can't get beat over the top. You got to be able to run. And I'm going to start with Will Johnson. Does he run? Will he run at all during this draft process? And if he doesn't, I think that's a red flag for him. You could have a situation where we never see the top 3 corners by a lot of rating systems. Will Johnson, Benjamin Morrison, Siobhan Ravel, none of them might run this entire draft process, too, because of injury. So I think seeing what Will Johnson decides to do will be huge. And then once you get to that next group, the Jahdae Barrons, the Trey Amoses, the Azare Thomases, the Kobe Bryants, the Maxwell Hairstons, how those guys run, I think, could go a long way in determining what order they go in rounds 2 and 3 of this draft.
And I think the safest one of the top three as far as estimated testing would be Ravel because he's estimated 6'2", 188 pounds. And scouts believed all along he's a guy that's going to go under 4.4. Johnson, Morrison, probably a little bit slower than that, although they're not slow, but they're not as fast as Shannon Ravel. I mean, we talked about Jahdae Barron, or at least the last show, one of the viewers asked the question about Jahdae Barron going ahead of Will Johnson. How fast is Jahdae Barron? I mean, he's expected to be a low 4.5 guy. Can he get into the low 4.4s? You mentioned Thomas. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, 6'1.5", 191 pounds. He's physical. He's developing ball skills.
Looks great. He's like the body type you want for a corner, man.
Is he a good athlete? How fast is he? I think he's got a lot riding on it. I'm going to throw a name out there, Dorian Strong of Virginia Tech, who I like a lot. 6'1.5", 182, has shown some good ball skills. I don't know if his downfield speed at times is questionable to me, but I'm told he's probably running the 4.3s. So keep an eye out for that.
All right, then safety, Tony. We've seen so many awesome safeties just not run that well.
Yeah.
So I don't know how seriously to take this. How do you think this safety class, Kyle Hamilton didn't run that well. He didn't test all that well. You go back, Simmons who went to Denver, didn't test all that well.
The kid from Alabama, he's right now.
Yeah, correct. So I don't know how important testing at the safety spot is. Obviously, there are thresholds. You don't want to have like a 4.7 safety, obviously, but you don't need a bunch of 4.4 safeties either.
And I would agree with you. The interesting thing is, I think Malachi Starks, he's the number one safety. He's the only safety that's going to go in the first round. Go down a little, your next two guys, Nick Emanawari of South Carolina, Malik Verdon of Iowa State. You want to see their height, their weight, their measurements, and how they test. Are they safeties? Are they one-gap linebackers? Are they free safeties? Are they strong safeties? Are they zone safeties? So the top guys after Starks, the way the NFL is using big college safeties more as linebackers, I think it's going to be very interesting to watch those numbers from those two players.
Awesome. All right, Tony, anything else you want the fans to know about the Combine this year before we get on a plane and head out to Indy for some steak and some shrimp cocktail and other adult beverages in the evening hours?
I'm a Weber Grill guy. I mean, everyone goes to say Elmo's. I like Weber Grill, although they've kind of changed the menu, not to my liking. But no, I mean, it'll be fun. Listen, don't get all wrapped up. And everyone's going to go crazy over the results of the Combine. Don't get wrapped up. It's just one piece of the puzzle, to as far as the entire equation.
Absolutely, but it'll be fun to see Tony out there. We'll get all our intel from everyone else that's out there. We'll have our normal shows. Guys, if you like the draft, Big Blue Kickoff Live, I know it's a giant show, but we'll have like 16 to 20 draft guests over the course of the week. Tony will be one of them, talking football with us out there in Indy. So thanks for being with us. That's Draft Season presented by Moody's, a proud partner of New York Giants. For Tony Pauline from Sports Kita, I am John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.